Stop and look at your tackle box. You spent $300. You researched for hours. You bought what the pros use. And after a full day on the water, what happens? You come home with 2 dinks and a story about the one that got away. This isn't fishing. This is a slot machine with a trolling motor. But what if I told you there's a bait that pulls base from 100 yards away? Imagine triggering their predator instinct so violently they abandon cover to investigate. A feeding response so primal that water temperature doesn't matter, barometric pressure doesn't matter, and moon phase becomes irrelevant. You deploy it once, and it works for hours without a single recast. This isn't some new lure technology. It's older than plastic worms. In the 1950s and 60s, it was standard practice across the South. Tournament anglers used it. Guide services promoted it. Fishing magazines called it the most effective fish attractor ever discovered. But then it vanished. Not because it stopped working, not because something better came along. It was systematically removed from the sport because a bait that draws fish for 6 hours without needing replacement is a disaster for an industry built on selling you lures every weekend. This is the story of chumming for base, the blood-based attractor that worked too well. But here's the tragedy. Even the few anglers who know about chumming today make one critical mistake in the first 3 minutes. Why? Because they don't understand what actually triggers the strike. Welcome to Fish Zone, resurrecting the methods the base industry buried. Stop for a moment and look at modern base fishing. What do you actually see? You see an endless cycle of consumption disguised as sport. We've been conditioned to believe that catching base requires $50 crankbaits, color-matched plastics for every water clarity, and a new technique every season. Expensive lures, complicated electronics, sponsored gear, all designed with one purpose: keep you buying. It's an infinite loop of spending for mediocre reward. You drop $200 at Bass Pro Shops every month, and the moment the fish get pressured or the weather shifts, those lures sit untouched while you scroll forums looking for the next magic bullet. It's why we're slaves to the tackle industry. Modern base fishing isn't about outsmarting fish. It's a business model built on your repeated frustration. Let's talk about efficiency. In fishing, results are everything, and conventional lure fishing is mathematically inefficient. Look at the numbers. A single swim bait costs $18. It lasts maybe 12 casts before a pike shreds it or it snags on timber. Your catch rate? About 0.3 bass per hour if you're skilled. To catch your limit of 5 keepers this weekend, you need to fish 7 hours, burn through 4 lures, and pray the bite window aligns with your schedule. You are the perpetual customer. The industry is the house, and the house always wins. Chumming is different. It's not a lure you cast and retrieve 40 times, hoping for a reaction strike. It's a scent cloud that broadcasts dinner is served across 2 football fields of water. Once you deploy it, base come to you for the next 4 to 6 hours. One application, multiple hookups. And here's the kicker. It costs you nothing if you fish regularly, because you make it from the guts of the first fish you catch. Do the math. Conventional approach. $72 in lures, 7 hours of casting, 5 bass if you're lucky. Chumming approach. $0 in bait, passive attraction while you work structure, 12 to 18 bass in the same window. That's not just better. That's a different sport entirely. So where did chumming come from? And why did it disappear? Blood-based fish attraction comes from commercial fishermen and saltwater anglers, a technique perfected over centuries for drawing pelagic predators to the boat in open water. But its story in American base fishing is even more interesting. In the 1940s and 50s, chumming wasn't some fringe tactic. It was standard operating procedure. Southern guides actively promoted it. During the post-war fishing boom, when tackle was expensive and base populations were thick, serious anglers embraced it. Why? Because it was a force multiplier that required almost zero recurring cost. It was the most democratic method of the era. A working-class angler could outfish a wealthy sportsman with cheap gear and fish guts. But after the 1970s, everything changed. The base boom brought the era of professional tournaments and sponsorship money. The goal was no longer just catching fish. The goal was selling gear. Lure manufacturers needed to move plastic. Retailers needed repeat purchases. A chum bag that worked all day without needing a single lure replacement was terrible for business. Simultaneously, the sport fishing industry exploded with artificial baits designed for competitive markets, not effectiveness. They were colorful, patented, marketable. Chumming didn't fit the mold. It wasn't sexy. It couldn't be branded. So the stores stopped mentioning it. The magazines stopped writing about it. And in one generation, a technique that was once gospel became urban legend. They replaced proven effectiveness with disposable products. But here's the irony. While they were busy erasing chumming, they accidentally buried the biggest secret about largemouth bass. A secret that makes reaction strikes look like a coin flip. Let's talk about base olfactory response. First, scent dispersion. This isn't some subtle attractant that works in a 3-foot radius. It's a chemical broadcast that travels on current and thermoclines like smoke in wind. Base can detect amino acids at concentrations of 1 part per billion. Fish blood, especially from baitfish like shad or bluegill, contains the exact protein signatures that trigger their feeding neurology. When you introduce fresh blood and tissue into water, you're not just creating smell. You're activating a predator's biological alarm system that screams, "Injured prey available now." A plastic worm has 0 scent signature. If you add commercial scent, it disperses in 12 minutes and attracts fish within maybe 8 feet. If you work it wrong, it looks unnatural. If the fish are pressured, they ignore it completely. If the water is stained, they can't see it. If the temperature drops, they won't chase it. Chumming works like a dinner bell. It has scent molecules that act like blood in the water because they are blood in the water. Base respond instinctively. Predatory aggression is triggered automatically. This means you can fish in muddy water after a storm, use cheap gear and basic hooks, and still pull aggressive strikes in 40-degree weather, without electronics, without matching the hatch, without perfect technique. Just simple presentation working with natural biology that base have followed for millennia. In a scenario of high fishing pressure, or even just typical weekend conditions, this isn't just an advantage. This is domination. But like I warned at the beginning, chumming deployment requires timing. If you don't understand water movement, you'll dump chum in dead water and wonder why nothing happens. So how do you master current dynamics? Here's the secret that transforms chumming from interesting idea to fish stacking reality. You don't fight the current. You use it as your delivery system. Now, are you ready to deploy this method? Here's the exact process that old-school Southern guides used but never shared publicly. First, you need your chum source. Catch your first fish of the day, any bait fish or small base. Fillet it if you're keeping it, or use one you brought from a previous trip. Take the guts, blood, and any scraps. Chop them into dime-sized pieces. You want surface area, not whole chunks. Put them in a mesh bag. An old onion bag works perfectly. Add a small rock for weight. This is your chum bag. Now here's where most people fail. They drop it straight down next to the boat and expect magic. That's not how scent works. You need to read the current or wind drift. Find structure where you want to fish, a submerged point, a creek channel, a brush pile. Position yourself up current or upwind from that structure by about 50 yards. Deploy your chum bag on a rope. Let it sink to mid-depth, not on the bottom where it gets buried, not on the surface where it disperses too fast. Mid-column is the sweet spot. The current carries the scent plume downstream directly over your target structure. Base holding in that cover smell the blood trail and start moving toward the source. Here's the timing. Give it 18 to 25 minutes before you make your first cast. You'll see baitfish scattering. You might see surface swirls. That's base moving into the zone. Now you fish. Use simple presentations, a live shiner on a circle hook, a chunk of cut bait on a Carolina rig. Even a plastic worm works now because the base are already amped up and hunting. Cast past the structure and work it back through the scent cloud. Watch for the magic. The moment you feel that first thump, not a nibble, a thump, count to 2. The line will go slack for a split second. That's when he turned to swallow. Now you set the hook. The rod loads. The drag screams. You're connected to a base that came looking for an easy meal and found your hook instead. But And this is critical, 90% of anglers pull the chum bag too early. They get impatient after 10 minutes and start casting. The bass aren't there yet. The scent hasn't concentrated. You spook the area with lure splash before the dinner bell even rang. The fix is discipline. Set a timer on your phone, 22 minutes minimum. Let the biology do the work. In that moment when you feel the rod tip load and the bass commits but hasn't fully turned yet, waiting those 2 seconds is the difference between a hookup and a miss. Most people set too early. The bass feels resistance and spits it. You wait for the swallow, then you bury the hook. That's how you convert 85% of bites instead of 30. Chumming works best in reservoirs, rivers, and natural lakes where current or wind creates drift. If you fish highland reservoirs in the summer with thermoclines, this is perfect. But if you fish small farm ponds with zero current, don't panic. This technique adapts. In still water, use a smaller chum bag and position it directly in the thickest cover, then back off and cast to the edges. The scent disperses slower, but concentrates tighter. When the water is cold and bass are sluggish, add more blood and reduce the chunk size. That increases the scent molecule release. It adapts like a guided missile while maintaining the core principle of chemical attraction. Timeline of results? First session, expect 4 to 7 bass if you're in decent water. First week of practicing the timing and current reading, you'll consistently double your previous averages. First month, you'll have dialed in your local waters so precisely that you'll know exactly where to deploy for morning, midday, and evening bites. After 6 months, you'll wonder how you ever wasted money on lure fishing. Where to get materials? Any fish you catch provides free chum. Keep a small cooler in your truck. Freeze bait fish guts from cleaning your catch. Use mesh produce bags from the grocery store. Old-school bass forums and southern fishing communities still share recipes for chum mixes. Some guys add anise oil or garlic powder, but honestly, pure blood and tissue is all you need. The fish don't care about your seasoning. A retired tournament angler in East Texas is holding a stringer with 11 largemouth, smallest one pushing 4 pounds. His third trip using chum deployment after 37 years of conventional lure fishing. Before discovering this method, he averaged 19 bass per month across 8 outings. Now he's hitting that number in 2 days. He estimates he's saved $1,400 in lures over 8 months. Today, he says he'll never go back to the endless tackle rotation. The catch rate speaks for itself. From 2.4 bass per trip to 8.7 on the same lakes he's fished since 1983. A college student in Alabama started chumming because he couldn't afford the lure addiction. First weekend, 5 bass in 3 hours on a farm pond everyone said was fished out. He used guts from bluegill he caught the week before and a 40-year-old rod his grandfather gave him. Proof you don't need a Bassmaster Elite rig to stack fish. He posted his results on Reddit and got called a liar until he uploaded the photos time-stamped with GPS data. Now 17 guys in his area are using the method. A guide on Lake Fork had a client who insisted on chumming despite his skepticism. That client outfished his other 3 boats combined, 14 keeper bass in 6 hours during a brutal cold front when everyone else was getting skunked. The guide now quietly uses chum bags on slow days and doesn't tell his sponsors. His secret weapon for keeping clients happy when conditions turn ugly. Each angler carries the same refrain. Works better than expected, regret not knowing sooner, and confusion about why it's not mainstream. The pattern is clear. More fish, less money spent, more time actually fishing instead of shopping. We live in a time where fishing pressure is insane. Tournament schedules have turned every decent lake into a combat zone, and the cost of competitive bass fishing is approaching the price of golf. Access to good water is being locked behind fees and private property every year. Mastering chumming is a declaration of independence from that system. When you use lure fishing, you're renting your results for 6 hours and $80. When you master chumming, you're investing in a skill that produces for the next 40 years. Think long-term. Imagine being on the water next spring during a tournament when cold water has shut down the bite. Everyone around you is cycling through swim baits, jerk baits, and Alabama rigs, burning $100 in tackle and catching nothing. But you, with a basic spinning rod and a chum bag you made from yesterday's fish, are catching consistently. While they complain about lockjaw and tough conditions, you know the truth. The base are there. They're just not motivated by plastic. They're motivated by blood. This is your chance to transform your fishing. Stop being dependent on tackle shops for $60 crankbaits that lose effectiveness after 3 fish. Start dominating biology that gives you results for the next 3 decades. This isn't just about catching more bass. This is about independence and mastery. You're not just learning a technique, you're rescuing suppressed knowledge. You're not just catching fish, you're breaking free from the consumption cycle. If you're ready to master chumming, smash that like button right now. It tells the algorithm this knowledge needs to reach more anglers. Subscribe to Fish Zone because we're revealing buried techniques every single week. And tell me in the comments, reservoirs or rivers, where do you fish most? Also, what's your biggest frustration with modern bass fishing? 73 anglers are already sharing their results. Be next. The knowledge that works should never have been hidden. Stop funding the tackle industry every weekend. Start fishing with intelligence for the rest of your life. Fish Zone, where serious anglers learn what actually works.